if you don't have kids, do you have to care about climate change?
Yes.
Why? Because Cleo said
Because
so.
other human beings might suffer as a result.
So I'm so deeply curious about the future of baby making.
Totally fascinating because there are real sci-fi-like advances here. And then also, it gets back to something that you were saying, I think, before we started recording about how little we know.
Smart girl. Dumb questions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Smart Girl Dumb Questions. I'm Nayeema Raza, your smart girl with the dumb questions. And today, my dumb questions are about the future. I want to talk to Cleo Abram, who's an independent journalist like me and has this show called Huge If True. It has 5 million plus subscribers on YouTube. And in each episode, Cleo kind of peers into future technologies in this glass half full kind of way. It's like Black Mirror, but with rainbow and sunshine and puppies, you know? And I wanted to ask Cleo, is the future too bleak to have babies? Because in case you missed it, we're in a bit of a baby-making crisis, or at least a baby-making crunch. In many countries, we're not replacing ourselves, which means we're not having 2.1 babies per woman. There's a global outcry about this, not just from my mom, who, as I told Mark Cuban last week, really wants me to have babies, but also from politicians who seize upon the issue, from economists and other experts who kind of worry about the state of our systems, our society, and our species. And if you look at the data around why people aren't having kids, it's a real mix of reasons. Many will tell you that they just don't want to, that they have other priorities in life. Some, I think it's 8 to 20%, depending on the age breakdown, say that they just don't like kids. And I guess you have to applaud their honesty. But here's a really interesting fact. If you look at people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, a big reason is their worry about the future. 26% cite climate change as a reason to not have kids. 40% say that they're worried or concerned about the state of the world. And these numbers are 3 to 4 times higher than previous generations. Millennials and Gen Z are increasingly worried that the future is too bleak to have babies. So I figured, let me call up an optimistic, tech-savvy person that I know and ask her about the future. And while I had Cleo Abram there, I had to ask her other questions too, like, are the robots going to steal my job? Is AI going to steal my job? Is an AI a robot or a robot an AI? And with all these innovations in fertility, things like IVF, artificial wombs, et cetera, is anyone in the future going to be having babies the good old-fashioned way? Here's my conversation with Cleo Abram. So Cleo, thank you so much for being here and doing this with me.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited for you.
Oh, thank you. You've been a huge supporter. In fact, Cleo was one of the first people I told that I was thinking about doing SGDQ, Smart Girl Dumb Questions, over a year ago. I think it was the end of 2023 when we spoke, and you were just hugely encouraging. I'm just a slowpoke.
It's a huge deal. It's really exciting. It reflects this moment that we're in with journalism. I think it's awesome.
What do you mean by it reflects this moment that we're in with journalism?
I think that it's a really exciting moment to create the kind of media that you wanted to see in the world.
Yeah.
You had an idea. You couldn't find it elsewhere. You wanted it to exist for yourself. And so you're going to make it. And I think that's admirable.
How long did it take you between having that idea, wanting Huge If True in the world and putting it out there?
Probably about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it happened really naturally. I got very obsessed with the idea that I would create a journalistically rigorous, genuinely optimistic show about how we could use technology to make the future better. And I couldn't find it. I knew that this was something that I needed in my media diet, and I wanted to make it if I couldn't find it somewhere else.
Right.
And so I decided to go independent and start this show. And it's become something really meaningful to me that I could put something that I wanted to exist out there in the world and see that millions of people wanted it too.
Yeah.
Really special.
It's been a huge success. So congrats to you. It's been awesome to watch as like a friend and a fan. And you have injected that optimism. But the idea of Huge If True kind of came out from pessimism in a way, right? If I'm remembering the story correctly, because you were working on a story about why people were not having kids.
Yeah, this was a story that I worked on for a show called Glad You Asked, which is a YouTube original show. And it was an exploration of all kinds of things about fertility and about economic data and about social support around having kids. And I began to put out clips of it and talk about it. And I was met with this enormous response of both interest, but also a feeling of concern that the world is getting worse and that having kids is this enormous act of hope in the future, and that those were somehow at odds. And I thought about that a lot. And I thought about what that said. And I thought about my role in creating work that either contributed to that feeling that the world is getting worse or offered people a path to help make it better. And I really wanted to do the latter. I don't think that journalism has done a good job of showing the world as it really is. The world is, in some ways, very hard, in some ways getting worse. And those are things that we should talk about. In some ways, and important ways, getting a lot better for millions of people. While my show is not about the sort of slow progress of major things that have caused a global reduction in poverty, a global reduction in things like maternal mortality, just a
you're not doing
reduction in suffering around the world over the last 100 years, which I think we don't talk about enough. My goal is to talk about the individual scientific advancements or innovations that could do that for the next 100 years. And then you go through, how does it work? Who's helping build it? What are the potential implications of that? What are the paths that it could go down that would be harmful to millions of people? And how do we avoid those things? Optimism is not the same as positivity.
I think your show, in a lot of ways, is about suspending doubt. Believe that, what if this could be true? What if this could be good? What could this look like? I think, the show I'm trying to make is about, in some ways, suspending certainty. What if you didn't know? What if you weren't sure? And they're kind of two sides of the same coin of our culture. One of the things I love that you have said to me is, we talk a lot about, is news biased and left? Or is it biased to the right? But you have a different take. It's biased towards negativity.
Yes. This is a line that originally I think I heard from Derek Thompson, who's an incredible writer at The Atlantic.
And that's an old adage in journalism. Like, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's a bad news story, it's a good news story.
Even if, and I don't believe this to be true, but even if you thought the world as it exists is well portrayed by the incentives toward negativity of journalism, there needs to be a place where you can explore how we might do differently, how we might do better. That was the genesis of the show.
I think another thing you wanted to do was just have fun, actually. Totally. I mean, one of my favorite videos is where you ask, what if you were to dig a hole to the center of the earth? And what happens, Cleo? Explain to the people, what happens if you dig a hole to the center of the earth, which has never been done. By the way, it used to be, you think if you dug a hole, you would get to China.
Depends on where you go from. You would get somewhere. We've never done it. It was this childlike question of what if you just went outside and started digging a hole? What would happen? Where would you end up? What would happen to you? What tools would you need? What have we discovered? How far have we gone? All these nested questions.
So naturally, to do this, you put on some boots and got a shovel.
Went outside, started digging.
8 million years later.
And there is actually a fair amount of science here. I mean, obviously, we've been digging holes for all kinds of reasons, from, mining to oil and natural gas to geothermal, and also for scientific advancement. The Kola super deep borehole, it was dug in Russia. It is about a third of the way through Earth's crust.
Okay.
And it is...
What is Earth's crust?
Earth's crust is a very small layer at the outer edge of our planet that is geologically different from what's beneath it. And we sit on this very thin, some people have used the analogy of the skin of an apple on the apple. This very, very thin, what we call a crust on a huge amount of geological complexity.
The Earth's crust relative to the overall Earth, is that something like the crust of bread versus a whole piece of toast, kind of?
Is it much smaller than that even. I don't know the data off the top of my head, but I believe that Earth's crust in some places, there's a difference between the crust under the ocean and the crust on land. The averages differ.
When archaeologists are they digging through the crust of the Earth?
Archaeologists are digging infinitesimally lightly at the top.
Tippy top for thousands of years, and they're only at the tippy top of that. So there's a ton of stuff under.
It's unbelievably deep. Molten rock, different kinds of layers of different kinds of elements and minerals. And the farther you dig, the more of this you see, the more variation you see. You go through the crust, you go through the mantle, you approach the outer core and then the inner core. And as you do that, you understand a huge amount about the history of our planet and the reasons why there's seismic activity on the surface. It helps us understand where we came from, what's going to happen to our planet in the future. And so you end up in this incredible world of scientific discovery and achievement just by mentally, we did not actually drill, mentally drilling a hole to the center of the earth.
Yeah,
So that
trying
was the
to
story.
understand.
Trying to speak to experts, trying to visualize what that looks like,
Right.
etc. It is also interesting to think about how much time we spend dreaming about what's above us compared to how much time we spend thinking about what's below our feet.
Yeah.
There's this whole scientifically magical world
Right.
there.
It is a childlike obsession. How do you keep that childlike curiosity?
For any adult person, you choose the qualities in your real personality that you want to nurture.
Yeah.
And then you live your life in a way that allows you to do that. So for me, my job is to think about what are the questions that would help people more accurately and hopefully understand the world around them. And that in turn reinforces that quality in me. And I love that about my job. I love that I get to become more of who I want to be by doing this research every time.
So you don't have like a research team of like 8-year-olds. You're not engaging in child labor on Huge If
I do
True.
have an incredible team on Huge If True. They are not 8 years old.
They're all adults, kind of. There's not a lot of research about curiosity, but some of the research that I have seen is like it dissipates as you age. And this is some of the stuff that they see through like fMRIs, a lot of Charan Raghunath stuff. It's something that dissipates over time, but when used, it actually increases your memory. It like turns on parts of your brain that are driven by a reward system. So it allows you to open yourself up to information, retain that information, and retain it for a longer time. It's actually like exercising your brain muscles in a way, right? And so kids get to do that all the time in a way adults don't.
We do sometimes say that Huge If True is a show for the kid in every adult.
Yes.
That resonates.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I feel the same thing about dumb questions. Like kids get to ask them all the time. And then you grow up and everyone just assumes you know the answer to things. And you're like, smile and nod. I'm at dinner, like secretly Googling, what is telegio? Is it a cheese? Is it a sex act? Like what's going on with telegio? I want to do a kind of round of really dumb questions about topics you have covered. So
please. Let's see if I remember my own topics.
Yes. And let's disclaim that Cleo is not a scientist. You're not a scientist. But you have covered a lot of these topics. Quantum computing. 1, do I need to buy a quantum computer?
My understanding is that quantum computers are unlikely to become quantum iPhones. But I do think that we're seeing very quick advances in quantum computing, so it's going to affect our life more and more.
If I bought one, how much would it set me back?
I have no idea. I mean, I know that companies
like
have
millions of dollars.
I assume. I know. I've seen like a very long line of them, but it was at IBM, and they can afford.
They have a lot of money.
So I don't know. I do have a vision of one day when quantum computers have advanced beyond our wildest imagination, and the old quantum computers are no longer in use. They look like the most beautiful chandelier you've ever seen. I'm going to take one and repurpose it and make it into a light fixture.
It's a dual use chandelier. You can get light and then you can manufacture future drugs. Yeah. It's like, that's what you could do. So drug manufacturing is one of the things you can do with a quantum computer. Just like give me 3 more.
The things I'm most excited about are the ways in which we think that quantum computers might be able to simulate the natural world in a way that classical computers can't. Within that category, there's drug discovery, there's material manufacturing. What else could we make that doesn't exist? And then I think there's also a sort of fundamental science approach here where it's possible that we can, through quantum simulation, better understand the quantum world, which we have some understanding of, but I hope that there's much more to come and that what we have now is a fairly limited understanding of what's happening at the scale of the very small. So those are the things I'm most excited about. The thing that most people worry about is encryption, but I would underrate that concern based on my understanding of quantum security, which will come in parallel.
So you could hack and try to just like quantumly I don't know.
I am pushing my limit of knowledge here.
Correctly. But you could, try every nth combination of passwords and
in theory, the rise of quantum systems that could break encryption will also have a rise in quantum encryption.
Yes.
If you ask me how quantum encryption works, I am now at the absolute limit of my knowledge here.
I will not ask
that's what I've been told.
Okay, robots. You've covered working robot dogs. You've covered self-driving cars, which are a little bit like robotic programming. And you're really looking at AI. And you've even fought a robot, although the robot didn't fight back.
Fought was generous. It did not fight me. Yeah, there's this clip of me shoving Atlas, Boston Dynamics' famous robot that's now retired. And Atlas stumbles back and catches itself in this incredibly impressive way.
Mm-hmm.
And then because Atlas was not about to shove me, I don't think it's trained to do that, I asked one of the engineers at Boston Dynamics to use the same pole and shove me in the chest the same way that I shoved Atlas. And I stumbled way farther back.
Oh, really?
Like he really...
So Atlas was strong.
Atlas was very strong.
But Atlas was well trained to not fight you
Atlas
back.
did not fight me. Atlas did not even seem to mind that I was shoving it, him, her.
How long do you think this niceness will last in robots?
No idea. I mean, it all depends on how they're trained, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
What I've been most interested in is how robots can, meaning all kinds of robots, both humanoid robots, but also self-driving cars, smart buildings, robots that are just robotic items, are able to be trained now in simulation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure other companies are doing this, but the ones that I know best, because we did an interview with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, are the tools that NVIDIA is making, namely Omniverse and Cosmos. Up until fairly recently, we've had to train robots either on fairly limited sets of data. So either you are actually putting the robot into a physical environment and running repetitions of different circumstances it might encounter to train it, or you're using motion capture suits, other kinds of limited data to help it understand before it gets into a physical space what it might encounter. That means that it doesn't get as many reps as in theory it could get if you could build a digital environment and run it without risk of harm or injury over and over and over and over again. You could speed up time in that environment. You could do a bunch of things. Omniverse and Cosmos are both efforts to do exactly that. And I think that what that means is that we are in kind of a big bang moment right now.
Yeah, like an inflection point.
It's possible. I am here pushing the limits of what I know about robots. But that seems to me to be a fundamental shift. And I'm told by experts that this means that what we can expect from robotics over the next few years is very different from what we've had over the last 5 or 10.
And is that like robots plus the chips plus the AI?
Yes.
Right? It's like those three things coming together. When will a robot take my job?
I am maybe true to form and optimist about this too.
Yeah.
I think that a robot will make you, a robot meaning an AI system, whether it's on a computer or physically setting up tools, will make you better at your job. But I think that it is unlikely to be crafting a human conversation in this way, in a way that has the emotional resonance that hopefully this show will be able to create, that I hope my show creates. I think that people do love people. I think that I am more likely to be able to get answers from an AI system and practical knowledge and all kinds of wonderful things. But I don't think that that means that the human act of creation is going anywhere.
Yeah, some jobs will, and some jobs already have, and some jobs will be created, right? Like translation oversight is now a job category that exists, though human translation is less necessary. What makes a robot versus anything else? Like, what is the definition of a robot? Do you know?
I don't know.
Self-driving cars are robots, though, right?
When Jensen Huang talked about this, he talked about robots as the full category. Everything from humanoid robots to smart buildings, including self-driving cars. To me, I guess my connotation with the word is that it has motion and it has some level of autonomy.
But hopefully not too much, not enough to push you back.
That's what I got so far. Yeah, I'm not sure what the technical definition of that is.
Yeah, and if a robot were to steal my job, should I push it?
Out of the way.
Out of the way.
Yeah, I think that you're pretty safe.
Okay, good. I do think the last generation of technology, in some ways, millennials are the most screwed generation because I feel like technology didn't make us more productive. It made us like work more. It probably made us both, or like work more hours. So we were not in the sense of taking less hours to do more things. We have, because we're constantly connected, the ability to work a lot more hours, work from anywhere, work on holiday, work all the time. My optimistic view is that it will make us work more efficiently once we have more AI, more robots, more kind of the whole suite of technology. You think that, or you hope that?
I hope that. I mean, I think, as you said, productivity is not necessarily related to the number of hours people work, whether that's because they feel they need to, because of a set of incentives or a system that asks them to or requires them to, or because that's what they choose. Those are human questions. The questions of what are the boundaries, or what are the requirements, or what is the competitive need to continue to keep up with other people versus what are the incentives of the human choices that could result in us actually meaningfully working less. Those seem to me to be human questions about the systems that we set up, less so technological questions about the tools that allow us to work more efficiently.
Speaking of productivity and human choices, here's the sponsored question. Is all this technology making me work more? I'm Nayeema Raza, host of Smart Girl Dumb Questions, and this is the sponsored dumb question brought to you by Duckbill. So technology is supposed to make our lives easier. At least that's what's happened in history. Like if you look back at the second industrial revolution in the late 1800s, our great, I guess, grandparents found themselves working a lot less. Over a generation or two, they got like 40% of their time back. But if you look at the last 20 or 30 years, we're not working that much less. And despite all the complaints about millennials and Gen Z, we're actually taking less vacation than we used to. But not all technology needs to make us work harder. That's why I'm a fan of Duckbill, the AI-powered, human-partnered executive assistant that can help you get your time back, take a vacation from your admin, and just get shit done. You can use Duckbill to send your mom flowers, to schedule your dentist appointment, to figure out which mattress to buy, or to order an ice luge if that's what your heart desires. You can actually let go a little with someone taking care of you. To check it out, go to getduckbill.com today. Use the code DUMBQuestions for 50% off your first 2 months. You can make your to-do list a to-done list. To-done. Okay, that was a little cheesy. So we've talked about quantum, we've talked about robots, space. We haven't spent time in space.
Love space.
You haven't been to space.
I have not been to space.
You want to, presumably?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But you've covered space. You've spent some time covering space. So are aliens real?
I think that it is more likely than not that there is intelligent life out there. Yeah. I think that we are constantly encountering reasons to hope that that might be the case. I mean, most recently from the mission to capture a sample from the asteroid Bennu, bring it back to analyze it, it showed that it is possible that we have significantly underestimated the amount of some of the materials that we consider the raw ingredients for the kind of life we have on Earth. That seems to be one reason to think, maybe we've underestimated the number of worlds on which there could be life. But I also think that we underestimate how immensely vast the universe is.
Right.
And how unlikely it would be to encounter other intelligent life. I have no idea if we would in my lifetime, but I continue to believe, based on what I think is the best evidence, that it might be out there somewhere.
It's striking me now that we know so little. We know this much of the Earth's surface and this much of the Earth's crust, which is that much of the Earth, which is that much of the universe. So we just know so little.
My hope is that we are the equivalent of infants right now.
You have put on a spacesuit.
I have, the new one.
How much does a spacesuit weigh?
So they wouldn't tell me the actual weight, which was interesting.
Oh, really?
It felt like, I would guess, maybe 160, 170 pounds. Like I could do a full squat in it, but it was really hard.
Yeah.
And it felt like walking more in an Iron Man suit than like an inflatable onesie.
Right.
There are
armor
hinges on each of your limbs that move. And as a result, you need to move the hinges in a very clearly defined way.
When you go out to outer space, though, it becomes that 160 becomes much lighter.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could probably do lots of squats.
I'm
when
sure
you get to space.
That when I go to the moon, I'll be doing.
Why are people obsessed with going to Mars?
I think that we have an admirable desire to reach farther into space. I think that we are a wonderful, curious species. And I think that it's a good thing that we look up at the sky and wonder, could I go there? The future that I'm most excited about would involve being able to better care for the Earth as we explore other places, as we talk about terraforming Mars. I think that looking back at our own planet and thinking about how we care for this one and make sure that it is somewhere that future generations want to be is crucial. But I think those things go hand in hand. I think there's nothing contradictory about wanting to go up and also wanting to care for the planet that we're on.
Would you move to Mars?
I think in my lifetime, it's unlikely, but what an adventure.
But I do like that vision of exploring the universe, but maintaining Earth as opposed to just replacing Earth and building something better, more futuristic.
My hope to go to space has nothing to do with the idea that I think Earth is not going to be a wonderful place.
No, you have proven. You have proven optimist chops. Don't worry. No one listening or watching thinks that you don't.
I love Earth and I love being on it.
Put it on a t-shirt. I want to talk about optimism because the whole concept of the show is that you look at these technologies and you go in and you're not Black Mirroring the world. As I said in my introduction, it's like Black Mirror, but with rainbows and sunshine and puppies instead of dread and anxiety and death. We're at a time where people are not really optimistic about tech in particular. We have a complicated relationship with big personalities and technology. And I was just talking to Mark Cuban about this. We admire these entrepreneurs. We we want to be them. And at the same time, we feel like they're costing us a lot and they are taking us in directions we don't want to go in and they're ruining the world. How do you look at that? Do you care at all about the personality and behind the technology?
I care most about what the technology is doing to people. That's the primary way I evaluate something. And I care about the vision that that person is trying to get us toward. So we have a huge if true, which is deep dives into the technology itself. And then we have huge conversations, which is a recent long form interview series that we just launched. And in that, the goal is to ask the most important people building the future what the vision is that they are working toward. But it's not necessarily that I need to agree about what that future is.
Right.
My job is to show it clearly and to allow people to make their own decisions about what they think about it.
Is it dumb to be optimistic? I mean, that was really the genesis of the show. No. You're so clear on that.
No. The world has gotten better in all kinds of different ways. And there are very, very difficult challenges ahead. But if you look at the progress of humans over the last 100 years, I think you can't help but be optimistic.
Do you ever worry about that clarity of being optimistic? You know, you went to CERN and CERN's like this amazing kind of looks like a religious institution almost. Like it's palatial. Yeah. It looks like, some church or something. And there's thousands of scientists from like 90 plus countries or something working there, or 80 plus countries.
Something like that. Yeah.
That just makes you hopeful, I guess, when you go to a place like that.
Yeah, of course. Like that one is very easy because that one is this kind of science that is in my view, motivated simply by the desire to learn more about this incredible world that we find ourselves living in. If aliens do come to Earth one day, I would want them to see these kind of monuments built to the advancement of human knowledge. And I think that's really important. I would want them to see rockets. I would want them to see this sort of effort to go farther and learn more. I watched a lot of Star Trek as a kid. And so that very easily makes me hopeful.
Yeah.
When I think about the things that could go wrong, when I think about the very difficult challenges with, for example, climate change, part of what I think about is the ingenuity of humankind that I see around me all the time, and I want to show more light on. And I believe that we have the capacity to deal with these problems.
And your hope is that when aliens come down to Earth, if they do,
that I think about sometimes
that this will be like the pyramids for them.
Yeah, it's like, who do you want to be as a species? It boils down to that question. And sort of imagining some other species evaluating us is a way to think about what we want to do with our life.
I'm imagining the aliens now digging through like our landfills and just looking at all the things,
they would also
stuff we bought.
So that's a good example of like, okay, who do you want to be? What are the things that you would want another civilization to see about you? Now,
coming back to the conversation we had at the beginning, the pessimism in the world around baby making. You and I recently were at dinner talking about this, the fact that there is a fertility crisis, a replacement rate crisis across many countries in the world where people are having fewer children than are needed to replace the world. And when you look at the data for why people aren't doing that, pessimism is one of the things that shows up. What do you say now to those people?
I wouldn't want anything that I say to someone to be construed as trying to encourage one or the other decision there. I mean, I think that's so deeply personal. Part of my goal is to simply allow more people to more accurately evaluate the world around them. I think that we underrate how many of the problems we face today are the product of our progress. That doesn't make them any less important to address. The fact that climate change is the result of removing a huge number of people from a huge amount of suffering through the use of energy doesn't make climate change any less urgent to solve. It just means that you see this as the next challenge that we'll face together. I think that that is a really important perspective to have if you want to be part of helping the world be better than what your parents liked for you.
What I hear you say is like, you're not negating the problem. Climate change is real, exists. I know it's something you care deeply about. Yet you have this belief that humans are going to work together to solve it.
Based on evidence, prior advancements, and the ones that we're seeing all the time around us. And I think, again, that doesn't mean that there aren't hard problems now.
On the subject of families, one of the things you've looked at is artificial wombs.
Yeah.
So I'm so deeply curious about the future of baby making, the technology around it, because already in our generation, I mean, a lot of women have frozen their eggs. I have, you made a video about it. IVF is real. And I think the oldest IVF baby is now over the age of 50, close to 60 probably. Yeah. So it's been around for a long time. Talk about how the technology around this world is changing and some of the things you've seen.
Yeah, that one is a very, very rich and interesting topic. We've made 2 videos on it so far. The first is about artificial wombs, and the second is about the process of egg and embryo freezing. The overall picture of fertility and fertility science is both totally fascinating because they're real sci-fi-like advances here.
Yeah.
IVF is this kind of wild set of medical and technological advancements. And then also simultaneously, it gets back to something that you were saying, I think, before we started recording about how little we know. That is also something that I took away from a lot of these stories of how much we still have to learn about how our own bodies work. And that to me is very rich and very interesting. Oh my God, what is it that predicts infertility? What are the tests that I can get done to better understand my own body? Like there's a lot that we still have left to learn.
And sometimes I find that knowledge is a little paralyzing, actually. Like there's so much now we could know, and there's so much information at our fingertips. And there's commercial incentives to make us believe that either we can know everything or we don't know enough. And there's, you see that like kind of fear mongering. I think women in particular experience that in our 30s. We're like pushed a certain messaging to pull us to these kind of lucrative businesses. But have you seen the TV show Dead Ringers?
No.
It's Rachel Weisz, and it's a world of artificial wombs and like lab-grown babies. And it's a remake of like a 1970s film, but it's trippy. Artificial wombs are how far away from being?
Very far.
Very far. Like generations.
As a technological optimist, I'm hesitant to say we couldn't do something. Given the emphasis that we're putting on it right now, which I think is not strong, it seems to me that we are likely to make progress on both ends of the fertility spectrum.
Yeah.
So I think the progress to allowing more people to get pregnant and stay pregnant when they want is very, very heartening. And then on the other end, there's all kinds of technologies that are saving earlier and earlier premature babies. But they are not technologies that are resulting in a, blastocyst to baby external embryo. They are helping make they are technologies that are helping make the process of having a kid easier. And that I just think is enormously exciting.
Yeah, that's a huge kind of revolution in science to meet our cultural moment, right? Because that's meeting the moment of feminism, women at work, like delaying childbirth, et cetera. But you don't foresee an immediate future in which, I'm going to take one of my frozen eggs and pop it into an artificial womb and out comes a baby in like 9 months. Or maybe the artificial womb is faster. Artificial womb
I don't think so. We have a timeline in the video where we talk about the various advancements that have been done in medical science at different stages. So there's a famous case of growing a mouse embryo all the way to blastocyst, I believe, which is right at the beginning. There are examples of, again, like I talked about, the saving of earlier and earlier human babies, but also they're testing different technologies on animals. As far as I know, no major technological innovation in sort of start to finish baby making. No.
Start to finish baby making is that. Have you read about IVG? Do you know what that is? In vitro gametogenesis. I think that's the word, in vitro gametogenesis. But basically there are scientists, I believe it's in Japan, where they have plucked the hair of a mouse and from that hair created a sperm or created an egg.
I have heard of some of this. I haven't heard of that specific example, but I have heard of some of this, and I think it's a very rich area for an episode.
So that's like a crazy, like that's even like not just from an egg but that's from a cell to a baby, which is a wild way to think about the future.
Totally.
But someone like you looks at these technologies like this and it's like, okay, now let me understand how they could happen. Yeah. And how they could happen in my lifetime.
How could we use that increase in human knowledge well?
Right.
That's the question.
We'll also then need some kind of technology that like stops your hair from shedding, because then anyone could take your hair and make your baby and then put it,
all kinds of things could happen. Darker paths.
This is the Black Mirror episode of what this looks like. But you're a trend spotter. You kind of like are ahead of things. So you covered DALL-E in 2022, maybe?
I hope so, maybe.
I think so. Yeah, earlier than people were using this. This is obviously AI-powered image making. What do you see now that feels a little infant but could grow and boom in the next year or two?
The most immediate answer that comes to mind is the training of robotics. I think that for me, once I understood the difference that we are experiencing between the way that we used to train robots and the way that we are now training robots through simulation, that feels to me like something I didn't understand about why the next 10 years might be different than the previous 10 years with robots. And that has really, like, now when I'm walking around and I'm looking at cars and I'm looking at like things that I would consider robotic, like I'm thinking to myself about how they might change in the next 10 years. And it's really blown my mind. And I think that is a combination of all kinds of trends in technology that it's funny, we use every day. You know, we use beautiful video games and we use our laptops and our phones, and we don't, I didn't, I'll speak for myself, deeply understand the enormous change that we've been going through in the way that we do computing over the last 30 years that has allowed us the opportunity to do crazy things with a huge amount of computing power, like train robots, or like, you know, on a more personal level, like make the video games that I'm now playing. Once you start to more deeply understand the trends that have led to the tools that you're actually using right now, it becomes very exciting to play them out into the near future. So for me, the one that I'm doing that right now, I think probably because I've spent now months learning about NVIDIA in order to interview Jensen, it's all about, you know, GPUs and training robots and how we're going to apply that science to the near future.
All right. So we all need to get smarter about robots.
I think that we're going to see a lot of big changes in robots. That would be my bet.
So don't just stay getting smart on AI, get smart about robots too.
Very much connected. But physical AI is what people are calling them.
Yeah. They will be supercharged and be able to think of new things, like how to hit back Cleo Abram when pushed.
I hope not that one.
They will but see
other
that
creative
pattern
solutions.
in the wild. Hopefully not that one. Okay, we end every episode of Smart Girl Dumb Questions by asking our guest, what is the dumbest question they have grappled with? They don't yet know the answer to. Mark Cuban asked me, why do people chew with their mouth open? And then provided me data about how many people get irritated by it.
Some more scientific ones that I'm curious about are, where is the most likely place to find aliens? I know that we're exploring various moons in our own solar system to understand whether or not they have oceans that could have some kind of life in like deep sea vents, sort of the equivalent of deep sea vents. But I'm very curious right now about like where the smartest people studying aliens think we're going to find them. So one of my dumb questions is, I guess,
where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
I'll stick with that one. Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens? Okay. It is weird that they get spotted more in the United States than anywhere else.
That
the
must
UAP.
be about us. That must
is
be
that a reflection?
I don't know what that's about.
Maybe they're like really close to us and that's why they're coming here. It's just the easiest place to get to. Like, we're going to Mars. We could go to, must be close. That's my clue, but we're going to find out. Hopefully we're going to find out.
Find an expert on extraterrestrial activity.
Okay. And then I'm going to make sure that you can put on your spacesuit and go find the aliens and do some squats with them. A little workout class. Thanks so much, Cleo, for doing this. I so appreciate it.
So much fun.
So is the future too bleak to have babies? I don't know. I left that conversation with Cleo just feeling more optimistic and delighted, like you leave any conversation with Cleo. I also didn't go into it so pessimistically. I wasn't part of the 26 to 40% that is citing climate change or concern about the future as a reason not to have kids. But I did leave that conversation thinking, I might have an Earth's crust view of the future, by which I mean a myopic and self-referential one, where I'm kind of just projecting today onto tomorrow, or what's happened in the last 10 years onto the next 10 years. But in fact, our perception of the future is dependent on a lot of variables: how long we think it is, what kind of rate of change we expect to see, what kind of direction of change we expect to see. And in that way, I think the future is grander than I imagined at the top of this conversation. And certainly I love what Cleo said about what kind of civilization and species we want to be when the aliens show up on Earth. I'm like, okay, I need to now reconfigure my whole life to live up to the expectations of aliens when and if they arrive. And on her dumb question about where are the aliens, I'm going to actually pose that to our guest next week, which is Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is an astrophysicist and author. And I also have to ask him about that asteroid that was reportedly going to maybe hit the Earth in 2032, because if that's happening, the future definitely is bleak. That's it for this episode of Smart Girl Dumb Questions. Please tune in to Cleo's show, Huge If True, and her interview show, Huge Conversations. And that's it for this week. Thanks for listening to Smart Girl Dumb Questions. Today's show was produced with Sick Bird Productions. Jade Watson, Diana DaCosta, and Kess Agnew were part of the team, with additional research from Claire Lichtenstein and additional editing by Holly Thiel. Our theme music is by David Kahn. We taped at WTF Media Studios in Soho with the great Tiana. And I want to say a special thanks to my brand partner, Duckbill. Check out the referral code below for 50% off your first 2 months. And I want to hear what you think. Is technology making you more productive? Is it making you work more? Or like Cleo, do you think these are all human choices? I also want to know your dumb questions so I can ask them in future episodes. So leave me a comment with those or email me at nayeemaraza101@gmail.com. See you next Friday at Smart Girl Dumb Questions, where we learn all about the aliens. P.S. If you like the show, leave a review.